Hello everyone, here is my response to discussion question number 1 for this week. The Hamlet problem, or Hamlet's concern, was that he didn't understand the meaning of his existence and why he was living to begin with. Basically, what is the purpose and meaning of life? So, Lady Philosophy answers that question and that concern in stages to Boethius. She first starts off by reminding him of his origins, and she says in Book 1, Chapter 5, line 4, "You must reflect on the land from which you are sprung. It is not governed by the rule of the masses like the Athens of old, for there is but one Lord and one King, and he prefers his citizens to throng about him rather than to be in exile. To be guided by his reins, to obey his just commands, is perfect freedom." This is, of course, a reference to God himself, who gave birth to the earth, who created everything and created man, whose soul has come from heaven, is basically what Plato and Cicero believed, and that is shown here in Lady Philosophy's philosophy. And so she reminds Boethius of his origins. Then she says in chapter 6, so only like one more page later, she gets Boethius to concede that God is the source of all things. And this is important because in her philosophical train of thought, she shows that God, being the source of all things, is the one to whom we look for our goal in life. She says, "How can it be, Boethius, that you understand your origin but not your goal, considering God is the one who gave you origin to begin with?" And of course she builds on that as she goes along, but she makes a reference to fortune and the fickleness of fortune, and how just as the wind blows wherever it wishes, fortune falls on the good and the bad, the wicked and the righteous, whenever it pleases and in any form it pleases. Circumstances would be a synonym for that. And she says this in chapter 2 of book 2. "When nature brought you forth from your mother's womb, I adopted you. You were naked then and bereft of everything. I nurtured you with my resources, and this is what now makes you so angry with me. I bent over backwards to spoil you and to give you a pampered upbringing." So she goes on to say that fortune is not the source of whole happiness, nor is it the all-knowing factor, but it can be the cause of temporal happiness or unhappiness. And people who are underneath her yoke, as she says in chapter 1, are those who find no purpose and meaning in life because they are underneath the pressure of circumstances rather than looking further beyond what fortune has done. So that's what chapter 1 says. And then the end of book 2 and the beginning of book 3, or I should say most of book 3, Lady Philosophy mentions all the false ways that people try to achieve happiness. And in chapter 9 of book 3, it's summed up nicely in the conversation between Philosophy and Boethius, where She says, so far I have sketched the outline of false happiness, and on this I will say no more. My next step is to indicate what true happiness is. And Boethius says, I do recognize, I rejoined, that wealth cannot ensure sufficiency, nor kingship, nor power, nor high offices due respect, nor glory, fair fame, nor pleasures, joy. All this is fleeting, all this is vanity and futility. So she then proclaims what is not only the source of true happiness, but true happiness itself, and that is God Himself, which we see in chapter 10 of Book 3, line 19. And so we must acknowledge that God is happiness itself, because He is the one who is self-existing, self-sufficient, and powerful, the originator of all things, and therefore the goal of all things. Thanks for listening.